was this campaign we had for Jessica's Law. You may remember this. There was a little girl, 10 years old in Florida, who was killed by this guy, Cooey, I think his name was. And the guy had a long rap sheet of molesting children. And he was out running around. He brutally, I mean, it was just brutal, killed this little girl, all right? She died with her little stuffed dolphin, and a guy buried her. Oh, it was awful. So I said, look, this has got to stop in this country. We have to have mandatories. If you rape a kid, you got to go away 25 to life. Florida passed it like that. And then we went on our campaign to get every state. Now, we get 44 out of 50 we got. Even Massachusetts, states like that. But that campaign started to galvanize people, and then they said, you know, this show's a little bit different than Larry King and MSNBC. They're actually doing stuff. They're actually getting involved in the fabric of the country. That was another bump up for it. My mother, who's a saint, still alive, 87, out in Levittown, I don't think my mother has ever seen evil in her life, because she was, you know, cloistered growing up and middle class, and she's seen bad things, but not really true evil. She doesn't know what it is, you know. She goes to church and she, you know, they do this and that, but she doesn't really know, right? And, you know, it's not my duty to introduce the concept to my mother. I want my mother to be happy, and I think a lot of people are like that. They've never really seen evil. I have. I covered 4 wars. I've seen it time and time again in the media. I've seen it visited me and my friends. And when it's there, I mean, if you ignore it, it's like a cancer. It's just going to get worse, because evil, it feeds on weakness, you know. Evil will recede most of the time against power. If you confront it, you'll be in for battle, but it won't. It's looking for the easy, but a lot of people don't believe that there is evil. You know, they don't. Secular people have a very hard time with that concept. There's always a reason why the child molester does what the child molester does, and we have to understand that reason. To me, we don't have to understand the reason. I don't particularly care. Once you rape a child, you're gone forever. See you. Once you murder somebody, you're gone. That's it for you, all right? I'm not going to take the time to understand why you did it or what motivated you to do it. If you do it, you're out. Now, I don't believe in a death penalty. I don't think society should be imposing that. But I certainly believe in camps and federal institutions that would be built in Alaska, where we would never have to see these people again. They would be out of here, like Devil's Island. And that would go a long way to stopping this kind of evil that just crushes people. And I mean, the pain, if you've ever been a crime victim, even a low level, you know how that is. But if you have ever been damaged physically or your children have been hurt, you know what that is. You never come back from that. Kids never come back from that. So why are we as a society even accepting of this at all? It's just cut and dried to me. Evil must be confronted.
How do you respond to critics, some critics that say that you call it the no spin zone when they refer to you as the king of spin?
Well, then they have to back it up, and you see what happens when they try. We had Mark Lamont Hill on last night, very liberal guy, who says the Tea Party is racist. Well, okay, make your case, and then I did, and then you can decide whether look, if people thought I was a spinner, we wouldn't be as successful as we are. They go, this guy's a charlatan, he's a phony, I'm not going to watch this. He says he's no spin, but he is spin. Who's going to watch that? So these people are just blowing smoke because they don't know what else to do.
Most people don't realize you went to school with 2 very interesting, colorful characters. The first one, Howard Stern at Boston University, and the second one, Billy Joel, as you were growing up in high school in Chaminade, and he grew up in Hicksville. Could you briefly describe, did you have paths cross during that time, and if so, what were they like?
Well, Billy Joel was a guy, he's the same age as I am, and he lived in the Hicksville section of Levittown. I lived in the Westbury section of Levittown. And I would see him and his crew up on hanging out by the stores. And he was what they called back then the Hood. Remember that? He was a Hood. He had the slick back hair like James Dean, and he smoked, and his, you know, my mother was appalled by his guys. But I didn't know him well. We would just cross paths. And then he subsequently got in a band called the Hassles, and they played around, and, you know, again, we would cross paths, this and that, and then he, of course, went out to L.A. and became a big, famous guy. Stern was at Boston U, and the reason I knew Stern was he was the only guy taller than me in the School of Communication, and he was a big schleppy guy, and he kind of had long hair, and he kind of like would schlep around, and he was like a throwback. And I didn't really know him well, but we knew who. I wrote for the newspaper, and I think he did a little bit of radio stuff up there. But I would see him, but I knew Joel better than I knew Stern. I taught high school in a private school, and there were obviously standards in the school, and I sent my kids to private school because of those standards. In the public schools, unfortunately, there's some very good schools, but once you get out in the parking lot, it's a free fire zone. And the principals will tell you that. You know, we can't regulate language, we can't regulate attitude, we can keep the violence factor down, but pretty much these kids are on their own. In a private school, you can't do that stuff. And I don't want my children at a young age exposed to MFers and those words and verbiage, so I choose to do the private school route. I think that public schooling is on the absolutely wrong track in this country. I think every school kid in the country should be in a uniform to send a message that, hey, we're not in the hood anymore in school. And if the school is taking taxpayer money, certainly the government has a right to impose standards of behavior inside that school. You don't want to take government money, then you do what you want, okay? But I think that kids should be in uniforms. I think there should be a code of conduct they have to follow. No cell phones and no gum and whatever it may be, here are the rules and you follow them. You curse out a teacher, you're suspended. You hit another kid, you're suspended. I mean, it should be rules, a little booklet that the parents get. And that's it. That's all. That's where I run my classroom. My classroom was effective. There wasn't any shenanigans there at all, and the kids learned. And some of them were pretty dim, let me tell you. And you know how I know that? Because I was dim when I was a kid, so I know dim kids when I see them.